Hello everyone, welcome to this week's video from the Purple Penny. My name's Mark. I own and run the Purple Penny along with my wife Catherine. We're a small family owned coin and banknote dealership in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. We try to hold these videos at about lunchtime Adelaide time every Monday, 12 p.m. And the shop at Mawson Lakes, where we do our business from, had its 6th birthday on Wednesday last week, so it was 6 years ago that we set that shop up, and it's been quite a ride since then, and we're still enjoying coming in here every day. If you're wondering what we do, we buy and sell coins, banknotes and collectibles over the counter here in the shop, and sell them via the shop or via our website. We're also authorised dealers for the Royal Australian Mint, so if the Royal Australian Mint decides to release products through their authorised dealer network, we occasionally get an allocation of those, and those are available in the shop or through our website. We try to have a topic of the day with these videos. We used to run through the news, but it turned out to be too much work, so I've just dropped back my workload a little bit. And we try to focus these days on one particular topic of interest. And today I'm going in for coins that are struck on the wrong blanks or the wrong planchets, and that's because we did buy a nice one a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I'd share that with you and run you through some of the others that we've handled over the years and explain what it is that those errors are and how you can tell if they're real or not. Now, before we do that, we'll say a few hellos to people. Hello Peter, hello Patrick, hello Damien, hello Gwen, hello Sam, Michelle, Ted and Ray. Thank you everyone for joining in. Now before we get started today, I want to say thank you to Damien Walker, who's watching today. Damien is the author of the Pirate Guide to Collecting Australian Coins, which you can see there. So this is an annual book that contains a checklist of coins that you can find in circulation. So if you open up the book, you can see pictures of all the different coins that are released in circulation, along with the mintages and the description, and a little checkbox next to each one so you can tick it off when you found it. And it's a lot of work for Damien and his wife updating this every year. It's called the Pirate Guide to Collecting Australian Coins, and I'll just give you a bit of an example here of what's in here. So for example, if you're collecting 20-cent pieces, Damien's got the 2022 Jody Clark 20-cent piece listed at a mintage of 72.9 million that year. And he does have some varieties and things in here as well. For example, the wavy baseline, the different mint marks in 1966 and things like that. So thank you to Damien for passing that book on to us. And if you want to buy your own book, you can head to www.australiacoins.org and you can buy that book through his website there. So thank you, Damien, for sending that to us. Now, topic of the day is coins struck on incorrect blanks or incorrect planchets. I'll just get the slide up here. So coins struck on incorrect blanks, they've got various names. They're struck on wrong, incorrect, off metal or foreign blanks or planchets. Terminology is used a bit loosely, but I don't think anyone's going to cry if you say that your coin is struck on an incorrect blank versus an incorrect planchet. Obviously, incorrect and wrong mean the same thing, so no one's going to get too upset over that. Off metal means basically it's struck on a planchet that's made from a material that that coin was not meant to be made from. And foreign means that it's struck on a blank that was not used in that country. So of course an American coin struck on an Australian blank is struck on a foreign blank, and an Australian coin struck on an American blank is struck on a foreign blank. Now, how do these happen? They used to happen mostly because of blank contamination of various mints. So back in the day, the various minting authorities would make their own blanks and then strike coins for those. So there was opportunities all along that production process for contamination to occur, where blanks would end up being fed into the machine in error. These days, most coin manufacturers do not make their own blanks. Blanks are outsourced. Blank manufacture is outsourced. For example, Australia uses a company in South Korea, and we believe that the majority of wrong or incorrect planchet errors that happen at the Royal Australian Mint these days are due to contamination at the blank manufacturer. Now, how does it happen? Well, it's primarily thought that it happens because blanks get caught up in the machines during various stages of the manufacture. For example, caught in the corners of coin hoppers, perhaps caught in the feed chute of coin presses and things like that. You can imagine one or two blanks might get stuck at the end of a production run very occasionally, and then the mint changes denomination or changes at the blank manufacturer, changes the blank that they're going to make, and then those stuck items are dislodged during the next production run, and they get struck into coins or perhaps fed into the wrong buckets and sent to the wrong country. It may happen simply because of poor quality control at the mint or at the blank manufacturer. Could be a spillage perhaps, or a worker that finds one or two blanks laying on the ground and picks them up and just drops them in the wrong storage container. Now, what are these worth? Well, here in Australia they're very desirable, and they're generally worth perhaps $300 or $400 for a less obvious wrong blank error, such as say a 2 cent struck on a Fiji 2 cent. Now, the reason why I say they're less obvious is there's not a big weight difference between a Fiji 2 cent and an Australian 2 cent, and other than a bit of strike weakness, they're not really, I guess, the most obvious wrong planchet errors. So those are worth a few $100s, and then right up to Australian coins that are struck on foreign blanks that are worth thousands of dollars. For example, there's been 20 cent coins struck on bimetal planchets from other countries. There's been dollar coins struck on bimetal planchets from other countries. And of course, there was a dollar coin that was struck on a triangular coin from the Cook Islands, which was an obvious error. Those more obvious errors would be worth, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000, so several thousands of dollars for those. Now, as always, condition affects the value of these things, but more interestingly, if you can identify the blank that a wrong planchet error was struck on, for example, if you can identify it comes from a euro or an Iraqi 50 fil or whatever it is, then the value of that particular error then increases quite a bit, perhaps by a factor of 2 or 3. It's much more likely you'll fetch a higher price for a dollar coin struck on a 20 euro cent blank than a dollar coin struck on a unknown 5.7 gram aluminium bronze blank. Collectors do prefer identity, so if you do find a wrong planchet error and you can identify what it was struck on, then you will increase the value of that particular error. Now, we'll just say a few more hellos before we jump into things, some pictures. Who haven't we got up to here? Hello Patrick, hello George, hello Bevan, hello Peter. Thanks for joining in, Catherine, and hello John. Right, so the first one I wanted to show you this week was one that we managed to pick up a couple of weeks ago. Not through the shop, I managed to find it somewhere else. It went unnoticed. So it's a silvery looking 2 cent piece, obviously with some of the design missing there. It weighs 2.9 grams. We tested it on our X-ray fluorescence device to 75% copper and 25% nickel. Of course, the nominal weight of a 5 cent coin is 2.83 grams, and it is 75% copper and 25% nickel. The Royal Australian Mint was striking 2 cent pieces and 5 cent pieces in 1979, so you can say with a good amount of certainty that this is a 2 cent struck on a 5 cent blank. Often when these things are posted up on Facebook groups, well-meaning people who don't know better will perhaps suggest that it is damage or a plated coin or a painted coin or whatever. So what can you do to ensure that this is authentic if you don't have an XRF like we do? Well, as always with most of these areas, you are looking for characteristics of the strike. You're wanting to understand how a coin press works, the shape of coin dies, how metal flows when it is struck, and all of those things can give you insights into what to look for when you are looking to determine authenticity of this type of error. Now, it's important to realise that coin dies are not flat. They are domed slightly, and generally that means that the centre of the coin die is closer to the blank when it is struck. So the centre of the coin is struck up before the outside of the coin. And what does that mean? It means that when a coin is struck with very low pressure, you tend to find that the centre is quite well struck up, but as you progress towards the outside of the coin, the strength of the strike decreases and it tends to be very weak at the extremities. And you can see that on this coin. It is uniformly strong in the centre, but as you travel towards the outside of the coin, the strength of the strike decreases. And you'll notice there on the obverse, or the head side of the coin, that the legend Australia is barely visible. The four legs of the lizard are barely struck up. They are mostly flat. And those are things that are really quite difficult to fake. In fact, I would say almost impossible to fake without showing tooling marks on the coin. Now, the other thing to look for with an undersized blank is you would expect to find metal flow, and metal flow happens when the blank is not constrained by a collar die, and in this case a 5-cent blank is much smaller than a 2-cent blank, so it would not be constrained by the collar die. So you would expect most of the time to see that the metal would flow outwards from the centre of the coin, and that would of course show up as fishtailing in the legends. Now, the reason why I say most of the time is that my understanding is that coin presses aren't just limited by pressure being the pressure required to strike the coin. They are restricted by travel as well. So, for example, you do not want the two coin dies smashing into each other without a blank in between, because it would cause damage. Of course, it does happen sometimes, and that's called die clash. But the coin presses are restricted by travel. So when you place a very thin blank in the coin press, such as a 5-cent blank in a 2-cent collar, that the coin press will not achieve full striking pressure because it just simply can't travel far enough. So in the cases where you have a very thin blank in the coin press, you're not going to see much outward metal flow because the pressure is too low. Now, in the case of this 5-cent, the thickness of a 5-cent is about 68% of the thickness of a 2-cent, and you do actually have to examine the error quite closely to see signs of metal flow. And in fact, in the legends, there really is only one area where it shows metal flow, and it's in the bottom of the letters of ELI, which is the start of Elizabeth. And if you look at the curves of the Z there, you can see a build-up of metal on the outside side of those letters, and that's because that metal has tried to flow outwards. So there's not much metal flow on this coin, but there is enough to prove its authenticity. And again, very difficult, if not impossible, to fake this. You can't just cut down a coin and fake this sort of metal flow without showing tooling marks on it. Interesting error, quite a nice find, and one that I'm quite chuffed with actually. So I have to talk to Catherine if I can share with where I found it, but I was very pleased with myself finding it because I don't buy much online these days. So, right, the next one is a dollar coin. It's a 2001 Centenary of Federation dollar coin. Weighs 5.71 grams. A normal dollar coin should weigh 9 grams. It XRF tests to 89% copper, 5% aluminium, 5% zinc, and 1% tin. And that's the same specifications as an alloy called Nordic Gold. And Nordic Gold is the alloy that smaller denomination euro coins are struck on, such as the 50 cent, the 20 cent, and the 10 cent. And it turns out that the blanks for euros are made at the same manufacturer in Korea as the Australian coin blanks. So probably what we've got here is some contamination at the blank manufacturer that has made its way here to Australia. And $1 coin was struck on this euro 20-cent blank, got through circulation and was pulled out of circulation at a supermarket in Darwin about 20 years ago or so, and was put aside, and a few years back brought back down here and sold to us. So if you know anything about wrong planchet errors, you would know that there were a number of $2 coins that were found struck on 10-cent euros. So this is possibly the first dollar coin struck on a 20-cent euro. Quite a spectacular error. Now this one is an interesting one in terms of the thickness of a dollar coin versus the thickness of a 20 euro cent. 2.14 millimeters versus 2.8 millimeters, or about 76% of the thickness. So what we see on this one is we do see that sort of uniform strike weakness towards the periphery of the coin, but we also see much more metal flow on this one than what we did on the previous coin. So for example, there's the bottom of the word dollar, and again you can see a build-up of metal on the circumferential side of those letters. The metal has flowed outwards into the bottom of those letters and built up there, and there's obviously a lot less metal on the inside of the letters, so that is obvious signs of metal flow. Again, very difficult, if not impossible, to fake that by cutting down a coin and tooling it. I'll just say a few more hellos here before we keep going. Hello John, hello Jonathan, hello Chris, Brendan, Antonius and Peter, thank you for joining in. So the next one is, I guess, a bit of a classic error. During World War II, much of Australia's coin manufacturing was outsourced to mints around the world, particularly in India and in the USA. And in 1943 they struck florins in San Francisco. At the same time, the San Francisco Mint was striking coins for many other countries, including their own. And it is quite a well-known error for florins and shillings, at least, to be struck on a war nickel blank. A war nickel being American coin. Normally the nickel is 100% nickel, but during World War II America needed the nickel for the war effort, so they changed the composition of the war nickel to be 35% silver and 65% other stuff. Those blanks then contaminated the manufacturing process of Australian coins, plus other coins from other countries around the world. And the resultant error you can see there in front of you is a 1943S florin struck on a war nickel blank. War nickels weigh 5 grams, which is exactly what this coin weighed, and this one does XRF test to 35% silver. So the percentage of silver isn't a 100% determining factor, because the quantity of silver in war nickels does vary a little bit, but given that it weighs 5 grams and it's 35%, it's a pretty certain thing that it's struck on a war nickel. This one has been graded by PCGS and authenticated as struck on a war nickel. Now this is an interesting one. If we look at the thickness of the coin again versus the thickness of the war nickel, so a war nickel should be just about 2 millimeters thick, and a florin is 2.3 millimeters thick, so that's 85% of the thickness. So this war nickel blank is quite a bit thicker proportionally to the last two errors. And if you think about how this is going to work, probably what we're going to see with this sort of error is less strike weakness and more metal flow, and that is exactly what we see. We do see basically a partial florin design which is fully struck up. There's no real flat areas or missing design elements near the periphery, but what there is very strong metal flow outwards. So this war nickel plank was compressed a lot and squished outwards, so the radius of it did increase. As the radius increased, we do see that metal flow, and the easiest way to see that is as fishtailing in the lettering, and it's very strong on this coin. So for example, you can see on the VID on the obverse there, which is part of the legend, the bottom of the V has slid considerably towards the perimeter of the coin, and the metal has built up at the top of the I and the top of the D there. So metal flow prominent on this coin, whereas strike weakness is not. Again, probably due to the fact that the war nickel blank is quite a bit thicker proportionally to the last two errors. Now, the last one here is of the other extreme. So this is a 2.8 gram blank, and it's copper nickel, XRF tested to 75% copper and 25% nickel. And what it actually turned out to be is a $2 coin struck on a 5-cent blank. Actually, I don't remember where we got this. No, I do remember. We found this at a coin show. And at the time we thought it was a very lightly struck up 5-cent piece, and it wasn't until a month or two later when we were looking at it more closely that we realised it was actually a $2 on a 5-cent blank. Now in this case, if you look at the thickness of a 5-cent blank versus a $2 coin, a 5-cent blank is only 46% of the thickness of a $2 coin. So if we follow the same reasoning with the previous three errors, what we should see here is a whole lot of strike weakness and not a lot of metal flow, and that is exactly what we see. We just see a tiny little bit of the design struck up in the middle, and again that's probably due to a limit on the travel of the coin dies rather than being pressure limited, and no metal flow around the outside because of course there was no pressure out there. The coin dies did not squish it down at all. Now, how do we know this is a $2 coin? Well, you'll just have to take my word for it, but if we try to match up some design elements on the obverse there on the left, you can just see that little V-shaped element, and that matches up nicely to the bottom of the queen's earlobe and the line of her jaw and her hairline. And then if we look at the other side, what we actually see is the line of the beard of the Aboriginal elder matches up with the line in the middle of the 5-cent piece there. So this is an interesting coin. We got this graded by PCGS, and it was graded MS62. And for a lot of wrong planchet errors, you know, we probably wouldn't bother getting them graded, especially the really obvious ones. But in this case, because you really had to imagine how it could be a $2 coin, we decided to get it graded because then it would be obvious what it was, and it just made it more sellable and made it more transparent to potential buyers about what it was. And as far as I know, it's the only one struck on a 5-cent piece, but I know last year there were a number of $2 coins that were put up to auction that were struck on all sorts of weird and wonderful things, including washers and button batteries and things like that. So while this was pretty interesting at the time, there's been a lot of $2 wrong blank errors pop up since then, which are far more interesting. Right, that's it. Thank you everyone for joining in, and thanks for the comments. Now, next week is the last video of the month, so we will try to do a question and answer session, which we used to do on the last video of every month. So we'll try to do that next week. So if you have any questions, please send me a Facebook message or send me an email, mark@thepurplepenny.com. Give me a call and have a talk, and let me know if you've got a question or something you'd like answered, and I'll try to address half a dozen questions during the video. If you've got some questions you'd like to ask me live, if you want to put me on the spot and see if I make a stupid mistake, then feel free to do that as well. And I would like to have a go at answering them. So that's it. Thank you everyone for joining in. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back same time next week. Bye for now.